Good Monday morning, and this is our fifth and last look at Islam, as in our new series of comparing religions. The others won't take this long, but Islam is such a critical and crucial, right now, moment issue that we needed to take some time to really flesh it out and let you see what's behind the scenes. Now, I want to reiterate that most of the Muslims that I have met in my life are amazing and beautiful people. In fact, if you were to travel the world and go into majority Muslim countries, most of them, you will find that you are treated very well. Very often, they won't even want to charge you whenever they give you a taste of whatever they're making or even give you the meal. They are benevolent and kind. How then can we square that with the Quran and the Hadiths that are full of violence and that call anyone who's not a Muslim various words like pig, monkey, dog, and rat? It's actually simpler and more tragic than you would think, the answer. And the answer is that very few Muslims actually know what the Quran says because nobody speaks the Arabic that the Quran was written in. The Quran was written in Arabic that was very influenced by Syriac Aramaic. Some people call it classical Arabic, but that's a fight right now because there's another version that's called classical. Let's just put it this way. It is so far out of date that you have to be a scholar, even if you're an Arabic speaker, a scholar, and work years and years and years before you can read the Quran in its original language. And Islam insists that that's the only way it can be read. Now, how does that affect them? Well, they don't read it. They go through, and I've been to the mosque, I've been through their worship several times. They go through the prayers, and the prayers that they pray are memorized sounds. They do not know the words. In fact, whenever I ask my Muslim friends, what does this prayer say? What do the words mean? They will look at me as if, well, that's a crazy question. We just say the Arabic, we quote the Quran. Yes, but what does it mean in English? They can't tell you. The vast majority of Muslims can't. And that's important because some of those prayers, one of the prayers, for example, that they are to pray every day, calls upon them and Allah to kill everybody who's not a Muslim and to do much, much more than that. But they don't know what they're saying because they just memorize sounds. This is not unusual in world religions. I have been to synagogues and sat there with the conservative Jews. I've never gotten into an Orthodox Jew service, although I imagine they'd invite me. Many of them will say the prayers and sing the songs not knowing what they're saying because they've memorized the Hebrew, and that's the way it's delivered. Now, Judaism does not require that it always be delivered in Hebrew, whereas in Islam, they says it have to be Arabic. So that's why there's a huge disconnect between what we see in our streets with the aggression, with the attacks upon women, the tremendous fraud that we see. What's going on there? Well, the young men, and especially those that are Asherites or Hanbalites, it is a huge denomination of Islam. Denomination might be the wrong word. We'll get to that in a bit. They are the radicals. They are the Wahhabis. They are the Muslim Brotherhood type. And they are the ones who go off into the other countries. And that's where all of a sudden now you have to put up concrete balustrades around a Christmas market. And you have to put metal detectors in front of places. And yet still they will march through right during the middle of a worship service in a Christian church and start doing their prayers. They are aggressive because they have been taught what the words mean in the Quran by the people who take the Quran literally. And when I mean take it literally, it's far more literal than any biblical fundamentalist takes the Bible. They believe that every word was said by Allah, but it also existed as long as Allah. And therefore, it can never be changed. And that's really what I want to talk to you about. When we talk about Muhammad, and all we know about him is from a book that the first books were written about 100 years after he died. So whether or not he did or said any of these things It's debatable. I'd say the odds are somebody named Muhammad who considered himself a prophet and who led war bands against other tribes did exist. But that's where all we can really say with any measure of certainty. But Muhammad's time in the 600s, the 7th century in Arabia, it was not unusual at all to be warlike, driven by violence, horrific violence against any other tribe, to rob and to steal. It was not unusual at all to make a living by getting booty off of other people, taking away their things and killing them. It was not unusual at all to enslave people, men, women, and children, or to go into an area, kill the men, force the women who are of certain age to be slaves to you in every sense of that term, and to either sell the children into slavery or to do away with them. I'm having to be careful because YouTube fights us on all of these. It was not unusual to trade women as property and to hand them out as prizes to your men, no matter what the women said, thought, or wanted. It was not unusual to kill your rivals, to keep your position at the top, and to order killings to make sure you kept your power. He was not unusual for the 600s Arabia. The problem is that Islam teaches that Muhammad is the model of manhood and piety, and so everybody needs to be like him. That locks us in to that, all of that, the marrying of 6-year-olds, the slavery, all of this, it locks them into that because he cannot be questioned. He's the most pure man that ever lived. He is the model for all of them. And without a reformation, without any being able to change this, I don't see much hope in the future. Now, at one time, there was hope. The Muslims have always been about spreading Islam by violence, and that's the way they have done. If you take a look at the battles, they'll say it's a reaction against the Crusades, but the Muslims were taking over countries for well over 300 years before Christians ever launched a first crusade. The Muslims will come in and they give you 3 chances. We've talked about this: convert, die, or become a dhimmi, a minor person in the community that has to pay a special tax, wear certain clothing and markings, cannot have certain jobs. And you're locked into that because there's no reformation. But at one time, when the Muslims hit Europe, they found the philosophers. They found Aristotle, Socrates. They found all of this, and they found science. And they took these people who knew science and elevated them. And so there was this golden age where there was science and discovery in medicine, astronomy, all of this. It was amazing. And then all of a sudden it collapsed and went right back to the 7th century, where it is stuck to this very day. What happened? Well, there is a wonderful book, and I'd love to add 3 more books to the reading list that I started with. It's in the first episode in the comment section. But if you want to know what happened, you really need to read Robert Riley's The Closing of the Muslim Mind, because he tells you play by play how it happened. Starting around the 9th century, there was a big conflict between hyper-conservative people called Ash'arites and those that were engaged in science, engaged in reason and philosophy, the Mutazilites. There won't be a test later. The Ash'arites said there's no such thing as reason. There's no such thing as causality. For example, if I, and this is one of the many examples that they used in their own writings, if I am hungry and I eat, I must not assume that my eating is what sated my hunger. No, Allah sated my hunger. There is no cause in food. If I shoot an arrow and it hits the target, I did not shoot that arrow. Allah created the arrow. In fact, in their belief, nothing exists outside of him, and therefore at every hypersecond, that arrow disappeared and was remade by Allah until it landed. And so if I die or if I kill, that is all Allah. There's no cause and effect. Science was killed, all of it. And because I don't have literally 6 hours to explain this to you, I really recommend, if you're interested in how this all happened, the Asherites gained the upper hand, and they still have the upper hand. The Mutazilites are very few. There are some very, very brave Muslim scholars who are trying to call their people back to an age of reason and logic. But reason and logic are actually made fun of and called haram or blasphemous and forbidden in sermons in mosque where you live all the time. Therefore, when you try to reason with them, that's not going to help, because they don't believe in reason. They only believe in the interpretation of the Quran that's been given to them, and it's a pretty strict one. 2 other books that you might be interested in. The first one to really confront the Muslims, and did so in an amazingly powerful way, was St. John of Damascus. It is a wonderful book. It is called St. John of Damascus, First Apologist to the Muslims, by Daniel Janosik, Janosik. Fascinating reading. And you get to see the early arguments, and you'll see some of the things we've been talking about. And the last one, if you just want a guide, if you live in a place where there are a lot of Muslims and you like to talk to them, or they're trying to talk to you, or if one of your family members is considering converting to Islam, Daniel Janosik, again, The Guide to Answering Islam. And this is very, very thorough, but very, very usable. You can actually go in the back and find, all right, what do I need? They're saying this. What do I need to know about that? And it is really, really good. The result of all of this is undeniable. I did several different tests on this. I accessed several websites, but then I also used AI, different iterations of AI. And no matter where I went, the numbers were the same. And government numbers were the same as other people's numbers. That is this. Since 2001, 9/11 in America, 2001, there have been 60,000 terrorist acts committed by Islamists. 60,000. Well, don't other religions do bad things too? Let's look. Judaism, less than 100 during that period, resulting in a few dozen deaths. And those have all been, as far as I know, outside of the US. How about Christianity? About 50 attacks with only a few dead worldwide. 50 as opposed to 60,000. There's something in the philosophy and the religion that causes this great distance. How about Hindu? Hindus have had 300 to 400 riots. The figures I can find are saying perhaps a couple score of deaths, around 40. Now, most Hindus, when they are rioting against Christians or Buddhists. And Christians do get persecuted a lot. In fact, they are, by every reckoning, worldwide, the most persecuted religious group. In America, the most persecuted religious group are the Jews. Islamophobia is not a thing. And it's certainly not racist, because Islam is not a race. How about Buddhist? Buddhists, you always think of Buddhists as super, super gentle and kind and sweet, because that's what they are in the United States. But they have also engaged in terrific attacks against Hindus, against Christians, and all of this is basically in the Asian subcontinent. It is estimated that there have been thousands of people displaced by the Buddhists, but we cannot find a number on how many killed. But still, put those all together and times them by hundreds, and you don't come up with the 60,000. And we're not counting acts of war here. We're talking about purely acts of terrorism. And every source I found said that the 60,000 is underreported numbers. In other words, it could be 3 to 4 times as many as that, but they are not logged as terroristic acts. Only other one I'd bring up is the Sikhs. We can't find a single terroristic attack by one of them. The reason we have to talk about this is because the West has imported tens and tens and tens of millions of the young, combat-aged, Asharite, Hanbalite, Wahhabist, Muslim Brotherhood type people. And they are very, very open. I follow a lot of them on X, and I listen to their sermons. In Arabic, I have to have subtitles, but they're the ones that supply the subtitles. But they also preach in English. It is violence. It is, we have to take it over. We have to take this country. And what will happen? Right back to the 7th century, as they have done other countries. And that is terrifying. It is. So it's important that we reach our neighbors for our safety, for our civilization, but it's also important because they need the light, the love, and the grace of Jesus Christ. You cannot compare Jesus to Muhammad. They are so starkly different. And so anybody that tells you, well, they just believe in, they just have a different name for God. They have not read a book. They have not done the research. They have not gone to the mosque and talked. I have. And so have a lot of others. So get one of these or something off the reading list. Start. You don't have to read all of them. I know it's a lot of books. I read them, but that's my skill set. But at least be aware and be able to speak up for your faith. As Peter said, be ready to give a defense of your faith. And you're going to have to find a smart way to do it when you're talking to somebody who doesn't believe that reason and logic are acceptable to their God. It's a tough one. We're going to be done with Islam for now. But all the email I get, and some of it has been rather sharpish, we will deal with questions on special Monday morning messages or attacks. All right? Is that fair? Okay. I hope you have a wonderful February. I don't know if the groundhog saw his shadow today or not. I will just tell you that holding aloft a rodent is probably not peak meteorological science. So here's hoping for spring. God bless. Cheers.